Alright guys, so welcome once more to NAPH, your YouTube channel where we demystify and learn anything that has to do with maths. Alright, so if you're new to the channel, you're highly welcome. Do well to subscribe. So you're welcome to the second series of on calculus. Okay, and if you have done so well, I think I have requested you go back and refresh yourself on limits and continue before coming, to study further, okay, as we go deeper and deeper into what calculus. All right, if you can look at the board, I have two graphs on the board, okay. One is going upward and one is coming downward, okay. Now this one, okay, you can observe if I put the points, let's say this is x1, this is our origin 0, and this is x2, and this first point here, okay, we have as y1, and this point here we have as y2, okay. Now our slope, it means we are going to form a triangle like this, and this is my dy and this is my dx, okay. So the slope in this graph is going to be dy over dx. Now what about this case? Now for this point, okay, this point, we can label this as what? X2, Y what? 2. We always want to start with X. And for this point, we can label it as X1, Y1. Yes, so what about this case, okay? We have this as our X1, and this is my X2, okay? And what becomes this point, okay? This point becomes my Y1, and this point becomes my Y2. So that we have x1, y1. So this point is what? X1, y1. And this point becomes what? X2, y2. Okay. Now, when you have a slope like this, that the slope is coming downward, okay, you have your slope n is going to be negative. We have what? Dy over the x. Okay. The question is why has negative come in? Okay. Now, we are going to do practical examples on this and see, where this negative is coming from when we do our subtraction. All right. So let's get into some examples and see. All right. So let's look at this example on the board. Okay. Let's say we have a straight line going in this direction like we had in this case. And we are meant to find what our dy over dx. So how do we find our dy over dx, or our slope, or our grade? Okay, the first you want to do is, okay, you want to draw your triangle like this. Okay, after drawing your triangle, you want to call your what change in what y, and this is change in x. Okay, remember your change in y is also called your dy, and your change in x is also called your dx. Okay, so the slope or gradient m is equal to what? Our dy over what? Dx. Okay, now what is our dy over dx? It simply means we have what? Y2 minus y1 divided by what? X2 minus x1. Okay, in our previous lesson we'll be able to what? Introduce this. All right, so let's now get what the values for y2, y1, and x2 and x1 and include it into this. So all you need to do, you have to come here, just like we have x1, y1, you say x1, y1, and here we have x2, y2, so you say x2, y2. Okay, now we just have to input it here to get our dy over dx. So let's see, our y2 is what? 4. So we have 4 minus our y1 is what? 3. So we have 3 divided by what? Our x2 is 6, okay, minus, and our x1 is what? 2. So our dy over dx, in this case, 4 minus 3 is 1, divided 6 minus 2 is what? 4. Okay, this can as well be written as what? Decimal, you have it as 0.25. okay? But because 1 over 4 is positive, so when you have a graph that goes like this, your m is what? A positive slope or gradient, okay? Or whenever you have a value of what? The value of the gradient or m as just a positive fraction or a positive whole number, it means your graph goes in this direction. Now let's also try some other problem that looks like. Alright, so let's look at example 2 on the board, okay? Now if you look at the direction of the straight line, it is coming downwards towards what? The x what? Axis. Alright, so which looks like this. Now let's try to what? Insert our triangle and put our points, and we're able to find what? The gradient or slope. So the first thing you want to do is you want to insert your what? Triangle, okay? So this is your triangle, okay? So this distance is the what? The slope, okay? Or the gradient. So our slope or what gradient, of course, m is equals to what? Dy over what? The x. And our dy over the x also means what? y2 minus y1, okay, divided by what? x2 minus x1. Now you want to bring out the values of your what? y2, y1, and x2 and x1 and substitute into this. So all you need to do is you just have to what? Label, okay, these points on the what? Graph. So for we to label it, okay, these points we'll call x1, y1, and these points we'll call x2, y2. Why have I labeled it this way? If you look at this point here, we have your x2, okay, which is what? 7. And at this point here, okay, you have your x1. So this is x1, which is what? 3. Okay. So at this point, what you have? You have your y2, which is what? 1. And at this point, you have your y1, which is what? 5. Okay. So based on this, we can now substitute into this and see what that gives us. Alright, so let's substitute and see, okay, what that gives us. So our dy over dx is going to be, so our y2, okay, is 1, okay, so we have 1 minus our y1 is what? 5, okay, so divide our x2, okay, is what? 7, so minus our x1 is what? 3. So if we solve this, 1 minus 5 is going to give us what? Minus 4. So that is why we have a negative what? Value there at the what? Numerator. Alright? So now we have used this example to see why when your straight line comes downward, it gives you a negative slope. Okay? Because the numerator dy becomes negative. So we have this divided by what? 7 minus what? 4. 7 minus 3 rather is going to give us what? 4. Alright? So if you divide them, minus 4 divide what? 4. Okay, this has a positive value. So minus divide plus is going to give us minus, and 4 divide 4 is going to give us 1. So the slope or gradient, okay, or our dy over dx, in this case is what? Minus 1. Right, so let's also look at some examples without what? A graph or the straight line. Right, so let's look at some more examples on what? Solving problems, that you are not having the graph, but you want to find the dy over dx or the slope or the gradient. Okay, so how do we go about it? Okay, first thing is your m, which is your dy over dx, is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So want to simply substitute. So you come here, you say this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2. Okay, so for the first case, we're going to have, okay, my y2 is 8, so we have 8 minus our y1 is 7, divided by what? Our x2 is what? 5, okay, minus, and our x1 is 3. So this is going to give us 8 minus 7 is 1, and 5 minus 3 is 2. So this is actually what? A positive what? Slope or gradient. So our graph, if we draw this, is going to look like this. Okay, so that is the first one. Sometimes you can leave your answer in decimal, which is 0.5. Okay, so I've been able to solve the first one, which is half or 0.5. Now let's solve the second problem. So all you need to do is label this. Is the x1, y1, we have x2, y2. Then you have to write out a formula and substitute. So we start with y2, which is what? 2 minus what? So y1 is 6. Now this already shows it's going to be negative, so our graph should look like this. So what for x2? Our x2 is 5 minus. Okay, our x1 is what? Minus what? 3. Okay, so 2 minus 6 is going to give me what? Minus 4. Now minus, if you multiply them, is plus. So 5 plus 3 is going to give us 8. So if we cancel out this, what are we going to get? Okay, so we are going to get minus 4 into itself is 1, and 4 into this is 2. So for the second problem, our gradient or slope or divided by the x is minus half or minus 0.5. Remember the first one was half. Now the second one is now what? Minus what? Half or minus 0.5. So lastly, let's quickly work on the last one. Okay, I'm simply going to put more. I'm simply going to say this is x1, this is y1, and this is x2, and this is y2. Okay, so we're going to input it in the formula and we'll get our answers. All right, so we have our y2 is minus 2. Okay, so minus 2 minus, okay, y1 is 4. So this will divide. Our x2 is what? 3 minus what? Our x1 is minus 2. So what would this give us? So we have minus 2 minus 4. Okay, that will give us minus 6. And 3 minus minus 2. Minus times minus is plus. So 3 plus 2 is what? 5. So our slope is minus what? 6 over what? 5. Okay, which also shows that our graph is going to look like this. Okay, but this we can as well say is what? Minus 1/1/5. Okay, which is also minus 1.2 in decimal. All right, guys, I will give us just two take home work that you have to do yourself. Okay, so let me just drop them for you to attempt them yourself in this series. All right, guys, so at this point I would like you to do it yourself. All right, to determine the slope or the gradient of what? We have point M and point N. Point M has the points 1 and 6, and N has 4. And point P is 2 and 4, and Q is what? 6 and 9. Now, when you're done with your problems, you should be able to identify the end of your work. If it was what? A positive slope, okay, or a graph that looks like this, or a graph that looks like this, which is a negative slope. All right, so that brings us to the end of this series. I'll see you guys in my next one. You take care. Bye.